Hello, Jays Nation. Welcome back to your YouTube channel, the Toronto Blue Jays News Network. The MLB trade deadline is almost here, and the Toronto Blue Jays are suddenly at the center of one of the most fascinating stories in baseball. Before starting the video, if you are a true Blue Jays fan, then don't miss this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. With the deadline approaching on Monday evening at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, the question surrounding Toronto is no longer simply whether the Blue Jays will buy or sell. The bigger question is this: can the Blue Jays do both? Toronto has reportedly remained open to moving players on expiring contracts, while also looking to acquire controllable talent that could help the team beyond the 2026 season. And now, with one of the biggest names on the trade market already off the board, the entire landscape has changed. Tarik Skubal, one of baseball's premier starting pitchers and a two-time Cy Young winner, has reportedly been traded from the Detroit Tigers to the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Dodgers have once again made a massive move, adding elite pitching to an already dangerous roster. But the reported return has also created plenty of discussion around the league. One rival executive reportedly described the Tigers' return as essentially bupkis, suggesting that Detroit may not have received enough in exchange for a pitcher of Skubal's caliber. For Toronto, however, the Skubal trade is important for another reason. It could affect the value of every other player available on the trade market. And that brings us directly to the Blue Jays. Toronto is coming off a stretch of baseball that has suddenly made the team's situation much more complicated. The Blue Jays have won 3 games in a row and 4 of their last 5. They are now just 3.5 games behind the final American League wild card spot, with roughly 2 months remaining in the season. So what should Toronto do? Should the Blue Jays become aggressive buyers? Should they sell their expiring contracts? Or should they attempt something much more complicated, a combination of both? That's the scenario that appears to be gaining attention around the Blue Jays. Today, we're breaking down the latest MLB trade deadline situation surrounding Toronto, the players who could potentially be moved, the impact of the Tarik Skubal Blockbuster, and why the Blue Jays could be one of the most unpredictable teams in baseball over the next 24 hours. Let's get started. Section 1. The trade deadline clock is ticking. The MLB trade deadline is always one of the most exciting moments of the baseball season. Teams have only a limited amount of time to decide what direction they want to take. Are they legitimate contenders? Are they rebuilding? Are they somewhere in between? For the Toronto Blue Jays, that decision is particularly difficult. The team has not completely separated itself from the playoff race. At the same time, Toronto has not established itself as a clear contender either. That puts the front office in a very interesting position. The Blue Jays are reportedly just 3.5 games behind the final American League wildcard spot. That is close enough to keep the playoff dream alive. And when a team is that close, with approximately 2 months still remaining in the regular season, it becomes very difficult to simply give up. But the Blue Jays also have players who could attract interest from other contenders. That creates a potential opportunity. Toronto could potentially trade veterans on expiring contracts, receive controllable players in return, and still remain competitive. That is the complicated strategy that appears to be under consideration. Instead of choosing between buy and sell, the Blue Jays could potentially try to do both. And that's where things get extremely interesting. Section 2. The Blue Jays are playing better. One of the biggest developments heading into the deadline is Toronto's recent improvement. The Blue Jays have won 3 consecutive games and 4 of their last 5. That might not sound like a massive turnaround by itself, but timing is everything. If Toronto had continued losing games heading into the deadline, the front office would have had a much easier decision. The message would have been simple: sell, move veterans, collect prospects, build for the future. But winning changes the conversation. Suddenly, the Blue Jays are close enough to the wild card race that the possibility of a postseason run becomes realistic. And that's why the front office reportedly hasn't completely changed its approach. According to the report cited in the TSN coverage, Toronto's plan remains centered around flexibility. The Blue Jays could move players who are approaching free agency. At the same time, they could acquire players under team control beyond this season. This strategy would allow Toronto to reshape the roster without completely abandoning the 2026 season. It is a difficult strategy, but if executed correctly, it could potentially give the organization the best of both worlds: